Welcome to this week's episode of the Aiming Five Hole podcast with Phil and Ryan. We're going to continue talking this week about the Leafs and the Habs as we always do. We're going to chat a little bit of the Ryan Reaves hit on Darnell Nurse. We're going to chat a little bit about fighting in the league, what to do with it. And if we ever get to it, we're going to talk about the ratings. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing well, Phil. Yeah, the ratings is like Matt Damon getting
Yeah.
continually bumped off the Jimmy Kimmel show. We got to get to it eventually.
We'll eventually get to it. Hopefully get to it tonight. We got a lot to cover with the Leafs, the Habs,
A
the
lot, a
Ryan
lot.
Reaves hit. Oh my God.
All
I
right.
don't
Well,
know where to start. Where do you want to start?
let's start with the Habs. We don't have to talk to them about them too much this week. They're looking a little bit better. You know, there's some improvement in the defensive structure in their own zone. Still too many odd man rushes for my liking, but that's a neutral zone issue, right? Not a defensive zone issue.
And thanks
But
to the Pittsburgh Penguins, they're no longer the worst plus minus team in the league either.
it's a good point. So, but my biggest concern with them, you know, given the number of, you know, high draft picks they have and talented guys they've got, like there's a lot of long stretches in games where they just don't look dangerous. You know, but either skating the puck in the zone or dumping it in and getting on a forecheck and being creative with that forecheck. It's not just a cycle that doesn't go anywhere. They just don't look that dangerous. And like watching, you know, Kaprizov against the Canadians in the Minnesota game, where the Canadians never looked like they had a shot at winning for a second.
Yeah.
Kaprizov always looks dangerous.
Yep.
Always.
Always.
And, you know, I want Doc and Suzuki and Slavkovsky and Caulfield to look like that. The only guy that looks dangerous kind of every time he comes into the zone with the puck is Hudson, and he's a rookie and he's a defenseman, and he can't do that every time. And even if he is looking dangerous, half the time those other guys aren't finding space to receive a pass that would make that danger get even more
Yeah. Do you
dangerous.
think I watched a little bit of him this week during the games, and I forget which game it was. He just looks like he's hanging onto the puck a little too long. Would you like to see him moving around a little bit much? He made that play, was it last night or the game before, from coming out from behind the net? He sort of moved
Yep.
sideways. That was a fantastic move, but I get the feeling he's holding on to the puck a little bit too much in the odd zone, trying to make a great play, trying to look like Kyle McCarr and forcing it a
Kale
little bit.
McCarr.
Kale McCarr, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
you told you we're gonna correct me all year long on
well,
this.
we're gonna have a lot of fun with names. No, look, I think there's two things with him, right? He's one, a rookie, and I think the coaches have talked to him. And like sometimes a simpler play is there, but I do think that he does find space, and his teammates need to do a better job of
Yeah.
moving in a way that's complementary to the way he's moving and find that open space so that he can get them the puck. He's a fantastic passer. It's not just the vision and the
Yeah.
stick handling. He's a fantastic passer. So like give him some place to go with the puck.
Yeah.
Um,
He definitely
so
looks
yeah,
dangerous though.
yeah, he's going to be fun to watch and a
Yeah.
special player for a long, long time.
So how would you
Um,
rate their week then this week? What's it? Was an
they're
A, B,
they're so
C,
I would say they're
D?
weak this week. They you know they won that crazy game against Buffalo. They
Crazy.
lost to Minnesota. They had a very strong game after a crappy second period against Columbus for the 5-1 win. So I think overall it's, you know, it was pretty you know, on target week. They won the
Right.
games that they should have won, and they lost the game that they should have lost. Although they didn't look too competitive in that game, but you know, they tried. At least look, they only gave up a 3 spot. So you know, it's not terrible, but
Yeah.
you know, we'll see where things go. Let's see if this defensive improvement continues, and if they can get comfortable with that defensive structure, if they can use that to convert more offense
Yeah.
and be a little bit more aggressive on that end.
I think we talked about it last week and maybe the week before, but once Patrick Laine gets back, it'll change their offense to a big degree and allow St. Louis to change the lines up a little bit and become a little bit more dangerous. It'll be interesting to see how much more dangerous offensively they get once he's in the lineup and they can score a few more goals because they're allowing way too many goals.
Yeah, but you're going to have to give him 10, 15 games minimum to find his legs,
No
figure out where
question.
he fits in on the flow of the game and stuff like that. But
No question.
I've got pretty good.
Well, it's
pretty good
glad that
hopes.
you're not on the doctor's couch this week because that's where I almost ended up after the Leafs. Like we were chatting back and forth on Tuesday night, or I think it was Tuesday night
It
when the
was
Leafs.
Tuesday night because I was active at
Yeah,
the Leafs game
yeah,
on
you
Tuesday
were
night
at the
too.
Leafs Ottawa Senators game, and I almost I needed therapy that night because they looked after having such a good week the week previous, they came out with an absolute dud on Tuesday night against the Senators. Now, the Senators have always given the Leafs a tough game for some reason. No matter what product the Ottawa Senators have put on the ice, they have given the Leafs a tough game, and the Leafs just handed that game to them. Like they were just terrible in any facet of the game you could talk to, just completely crap the whole time. It was just absolutely ridiculous. And I know Matthews was still out and still dealing with injuries, but it just didn't like the go. We talked about it the week previous with the Habs doing the flybys at the point, and then Nylander on doing the flybys at the like he wasn't even looking at the defenseman, he skated by him, and it was just it was just I needed some therapy on Thursday night. Now then they go into Washington. They
What a comeback!
somehow pull out a comeback. They didn't deserve the point that they got there, I don't think. I don't think they played up. So they got a point, which was great. So they, they got something out of that Washington game. And then last night against the Oilers, they played against a fast team. Again, the Oilers have always given the Leafs trouble because of the speed of that team, but they pulled out another overtime win, and Marner again playing great in the OT. But it was kind of, you know what, if I had to rate the Leafs week, it was still I don't want to say it's a failing grade, but it's a solid B minus. They did
B well,
not.
there's a big gap
Big B
between B
minus. Yeah.
minus and an F, man. Like, you
Yeah,
sure
but
you give them a grade that high? They
I
did
don't
get
know.
2 wins, I
You
guess.
got two wins. It's hard not to give them. They came back against Washington, played a solid back half of that game, but and they played solid against thing, but they looked so bad. And again, we talked about this. You can't keep having these complete ebbs and flows. Win three, play terrible for three.
Right?
You gotta find a groove at some point in the season. And we're still early. We're 20 games into the season for some teams. But you got to at some point string together a long run. And the Leafs haven't done it yet. 3 games to
Yeah.
me is not a long run. So they
That's their
got to
that's their
pull.
biggest win streak so far.
Yeah,
3 games.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Um.
so, so,
Well, I got
but
a
let's,
question then.
sorry, go
Who's
ahead.
their MVP so far? Because I have a view on this. Now, I didn't see
Oh,
the game.
Stolhart's for me, 100%.
Really, I
Stolhart's,
didn't. Stollards has been great. He's definitely saved them in a few games. I obviously was at the game on Tuesday. I watched a chunk of the game against Washington, and I did not see um, uh, the game against Pittsburgh.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
Washington.
no, not
Washington.
Washington. The other, uh, the
Yeah.
third game.
Yeah. Oh, the Oilers. The
The
Oilers.
Oilers. Sorry, I
Yeah.
don't want to say Pittsburgh. The Oilers game. But the clear MVP for me in those 2 games was John Tavares. He
Oh,
just
he's played
he
great.
looks rejuvenated. The only thing that bothers me about Tavares being the best player in a game is that he gets a lot of the interviews from the press scrum afterwards, and he gives the worst interview of any human being I've ever seen. He's the
He's
most
pretty dry toast, isn't he?
he is dry toast and
He's
a little
plain
bit
white dry toast.
and plain white dry toast and a little burnt. Like they like you're not enjoying it at all.
No, 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 no. You know what the
he's
other
he is
sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
he's
sorry.
just so anodyne. He doesn't want to say
Yeah.
anything to offend. It's tough.
Yeah,
It's
the,
tough.
the the other player this year has really impressed me with his continued growth is Matthew Nyes. He has really
Yeah.
showed that he's maturing, playing that net front presence that we need him to play. He's playing like a big guy. He is a big guy. He's taking the body. He's taking a few too many penalties, but he's taking the body. He's playing aggressive. He's scoring the goals when he's getting open. He's a target. He's making life miserable in front of the net for the opposing goaltender. He's being impressive as well. The other guy, and again, I don't want MVPs. I still say Stolhartz is my MVP because he's saved them in a number of nights and kept them in
Yeah.
game. But the other one is OEL has played. Oliver Ekman Larson has played. He's
Hmm.
been a much more aggressive defenseman than I thought he was. I didn't see him being as this
Yeah.
gritty
Look,
type guy that he is playing like.
I still think he's a third pairing guy on a good
No
team at this
question,
stage of
but
his career.
but
But
he's played well in this system. He seems to be fitting in really well.
yeah, he does. He know. But look, he knows when to pinch and when not to.
Yeah,
We'll give him that. It's
yeah,
just his defensive zone coverage can sometimes be lacking.
yeah.
But um, yeah, I look. I think the Leafs are in pretty good shape. But the Stolars thing leads me to this question: if the playoffs started tomorrow, are you going full bore with Anthony Stolars as your
Yes,
starting goalie?
unquestioned. No question.
Oh,
Because
okay.
for me, it's not about his body of work just this year. If you look back at his body of work last year with the Panthers, he
Oh, it's been
actually
great for a
was
couple
doing the
years.
same thing, right? So I think it's there. We just need to see more of it. And I think as this season goes along, and no disrespect to Wall's played well when he's being the net,
Yeah,
but Anthony Stolhar's, the way he's played, deserves the extra time when there's not back to back. And I think he'll get that as the season goes along. I think from what I'm seeing is Berube is really comfortable with him and confident in him. So I think we'll see
yeah.
that as the season goes along and they don't have as many games back to back. And they've got a short week this week and I think they've only got 3 games in the next 13. I think they're getting their week off because each half season, each team gets a week off. And I think this next stretch is where the Leafs get
Is
theirs.
the Leafs are getting their week? Oh,
Yeah.
that's
So I
good.
think they only have 3 games over the next 12 game or 12 or
Oh.
15 days. So they're going to have a
Is,
light
is
week. So I think he'll
is
get to
that
play a lot.
is that kind of like, I wonder if that's sort of equivalent to the NFL bye week in the
It
sense
is.
that, like, well, it is, but like, my question is, would you prefer to have it earlier or later in the season?
Again, it's a tough question to answer. I would say it depends on how you're playing. Do you need it as a break to reset, or do you need it as a refresh from playing too much and playing hard and whatnot? So, I would say for me right now with the Leafs, I'd like to see them keep playing because I don't think they've gotten into that groove yet. And I think they're still trying with now Hakanpää back, Dewar's back in the lineup. They got some injuries. Now we're going to lose Reaves. Thankfully, actually, it's not necessarily a bad thing for the next 5 games. We'll get that into a second. But we I'd like to see them get into some kind of groove and some kind of before they get some time off. I'd like to see them do something on a regular basis. But again, maybe a week off will help them reset and get some practice time in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that
Um,
goes two ways, right? Like, on one hand, if you're struggling with certain parts of your game, and I'm looking at this from like the Canadians' perspective, if you're struggling with a couple parts of your game early in the season, having a week off to
it's
have a
great.
bunch of practices to focus on those things and try to clean that up before you get back to hockey would be great.
Yeah.
Before you get too deep into the standings and you're already out of a playoff picture. Now the
Yeah.
Canadians are already out of the playoff picture, but for another team that might be struggling in a similar type way. On the other hand, to have that week off in the new year when you're tired, you need to find a way to recharge before
Yeah.
the
But
playoff push.
generally there's 2 of those weeks. There's one in the first half of the season, there's one in the back
Are
half.
there two? I thought
I
there
think
was just
there's
one.
I think there's two. I think there's
Oh,
two now. I think
even
there's
with
one
even with
in.
the Four Nations.
Yeah, and I think it's the way it's spread out. I don't think it's necessarily they get a
Uh,
full week. It's like this, the Leafs have 3 games in a 15, I think it's something like a 13 to 15 day period. So they're still playing,
hmm,
but in the back
yeah,
half, they definitely get a week full 7 day period off.
well, that's great.
But obviously then too with I'm not sure how it works this year, and that's something we should probably investigate and not sort of play around it, is how does the longer break because of the Four Nations play into that break this year? But
Yeah,
we'll see. But yeah, it's a lighter week for the Leafs this week. Hopefully they continue to get healthy and they find that groove. But
yeah.
we should probably talk a little bit about, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about fighting in the game and its relevance,
Well,
but
yeah,
we should
but
talk about
I mean,
Ryan
before we get,
Reaves. They came
yeah,
down
we got
pretty
to talk about
quickly.
the Reeves
Yeah.
hit
It
because
was
there's a
bad.
difference. There's a big difference between the principal point of contact being the head and the only point of contact being the head. I don't care if it's with a shoulder or an elbow. Like, that's bad.
It
That
was
is
bad.
really,
The first
it's
angle I saw
fine.
from it, I didn't think it was, I thought it was bad, but I didn't think it was horrific. And then there was an angle where they showed it from across the net and they showed him and they showed the way Nurse's head snapped sideways.
Yeah,
And I went, oh my God. Like, and Reeves is an older player. He's been in his league. He plays tough. He should know better. And
yeah,
I am absolutely, as a Leaf fan, everybody knows on this podcast, I'm a Leafs fan, and I think he got off lightly with 5 games.
for sure.
I
Well,
I I I was
the right
surprised it wasn't eight
punishment.
to ten.
the right punishment should have been he has to play 21 minutes a night for the next 20
Yeah.
games.
But I think
That's
it's
how you
good.
punish the Leafs.
Absolutely. Well, you're going to punish the Leafs because now this means they can't take Robertson out of the lineup either. So
Your
you
buddy.
win either way if you're not a Leafs fan because now we don't have Reaves in the lineup, which is great, but we got Robertson in the lineup,
Who makes twice as many
which is
mistakes.
twice as mistake, and he just looks lost out there. We
Yeah.
talked about that enough. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'll be
Well,
happy when the
okay,
Rangers
so
finally trade
right.
him. But
So
yeah,
the
I'm
other thing that I
shocked.
noticed, the other thing that I noticed was that nobody really went after him. Now, granted, they didn't show it on the broadcast, but it didn't appear to me that between the time the hit happened and the time the whistle blew and he went to the penalty box, that any of the Oilers tried to take him on.
I don't know if they actually knew what happened because when that hit happened, the puck was going in the other direction. So everybody had focus is turned. Anybody on the ice,
Yeah,
maybe the guys on the bench saw it, but anybody on the ice, their focus had turned north, going the other direction. So I'm not sure they
yeah.
saw it, but I agree. Like, but again, I guess my question would be on the Oilers, who goes after him?
Does it
Nurse is
matter?
the guy that goes after him. Like
Right.
if that happens anywhere else on the ice to anybody else, it's actually Nurse is the guy that's going after him.
Yeah,
Who else on the
yeah.
Oilers is going to take the retribution for that hit? And by the way, then Reaves got kicked out of the game,
Right.
so which was the right call, but so really hard, which thankfully the refs, sorry, took him out of the game to get rid of that garbage
Yeah,
out of the game, which was the absolute right call. So, but I think in the moment, other than the goaltender, nobody saw that hit happen from my vantage point watching the because the puck had already he had passed the puck
yeah,
and
yeah.
it was
Although the
going in the other
ooh from the
direction.
crowd definitely would have
Oh
gotten everybody's
yeah. Well,
attention
and then
back
Nurse
to
lying on the ice practically
blood
unconscious should
and
be
bloody.
yeah, it should have been something. But again, I don't remember who was on the ice at the time, but generally that's Darnell Nurse going in and making retribution. Who else on that
Yeah,
team is making that jumping on
yeah.
somebody? I don't even can't even think of anybody on that team right now
No,
is the tough guy.
no.
So
But I get, yeah. I guess you bet 5 games is pretty light.
yeah, I was
Five
shocked. But
games is really light. 5 games, 10 games. It should give him 67 games. That like honestly, like all the games.
absolutely I would be happy with that. As a Leaf fan, I think he started out the season. I get Berube why he likes him, plays with the grit and that heavy line. But
Yeah,
you could play without him. And
yeah,
but losing Pacioretty there's a need there for some heavy play, but I think that's where Nyes and McCann have actually proven to me they can play that heavy role
yeah, yeah,
differently, more
for sure.
skilled, obviously. Both of them definitely more skilled, and you don't want them getting into that. You want them playing a balanced game. But yeah, I think it's actually gonna be good for the Leafs to have not have them because I think you're gonna find out where else and not having Pacioretty because you got to find some grit from somewhere else. And
Right,
again, other
right.
than Nyes and Pacioretty and Nyes and McCann.
Well, I mean, look, not Pacioretty's never been that physical a player. He's been more of a perimeter guy most of his career. He is a larger guy and he's not afraid to
But
dig in the corners a bit, but he is a perimeter guy.
but
He's
but you
not
probably didn't see his interview last week that he did in a middle intermission interview, and they actually talked about it. And the interview did a very good job of, and I forget who it was. I think it was a TSN broadcast. And they actually asked him like, "You're playing a different style than you generally play." And
mm-hmm.
he acknowledged, goes, "This is the style I've been asked to play, and I'm playing because there's a need. I found a
Yeah.
niche on this team that I got to play a little heavier and I got to play a little tougher. So that's what I'm doing, and got to play a little more down low." So he
Yeah.
acknowledged that that's not necessarily his style, but he's doing it because I found that niche on this team and it's working for me.
Why he couldn't do that when he was the Canadians captain, I'll never understand. Anyway,
But it gets to the next
um,
point. We want to talk if
by the way, I will say about Nyes, just there's a last thought on that. When I was at Scotiabank, when you get down low and see him in person, he is a big, big
big
boy.
boy. And he worked out this summer big time and put on a significant amount of weight.
Yeah, he's an impressive physical specimen out there to be
Yeah.
sure. If he could get like, I think I may have said this at the beginning of the year, like if he could just be like 10% faster, he'd be
Yeah.
a tough kid to contain. That's
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
Well, he's playing the right style for his size
Yeah,
and whatnot. Again, down low, battling, playing the net front presence. So he's doing what he needs to do, which is great. But
Yeah,
yeah,
for
you'd
sure.
always like to have a little bit more speed in the lineup. But
Yeah.
he's
Okay, so we were talking about Reeves and how the Oilers did not send anybody after him after a clearly dirty hit.
yes,
But what about the reverse? And this is what I wanted to talk about regarding where fighting stands in the NHL now. This is one of the topics I wanted to get your thoughts on. And the first is it me, or in the last 3 to 5 years, have the number of players taking exception to a clean hit and trying to start a fight with somebody just exploded? Like, it used to be that if there was a questionable hit or a dirty hit or some stick work, or after a whole bunch of jawing and a whole bunch of players taking liberties in the corners with guys or in front of the net, all right, someone's going to stand up for your teammate and or teammates and call the guy out. That's what his role is. But now it seems that every time there's a clean hit that lays a guy out, someone has to like stand up, and it may not lead to a fight every time, but it is going to, probably end up in a couple of roughings or whatever. And
it
I don't
leads to a
remember that always
reaction.
being the case. Yeah,
No,
it leads to a reaction that it never really used to. It used to be, oh, that was a clean hit, man. You get up and dust yourself off and get going.
yeah, and I think that a little bit is because I think that other than the guys like, there's very few of the Ryan Reaves to me that feels like Ryan Reaves, Kempe in New
Rampy,
York, sorry, yeah,
Matt Rampy.
Rampy in New York. There's very few of what you would say the enforcers left in the league, which were the guys that went out and if something bad happened, they went out and sought retribution and started a fight or went after somebody on the other team. So I think what's happened in my perception is that, to your point, you get less of the fight and the sort of altercations after a fight or something bad has happened. And now you've got these sort of mid-level guys that are tough, but not really fighters.
Yeah,
And no longer can you make a clean hit. If you make a really good clean hit, someone's doing something stupid coming back at you. And I don't understand why. And I agree with you. It feels like there's more of that, what I would call the BS stuff than
yeah,
true retribution for a bad hit. And now it's retribution on a good hit. And I don't know why that is. And I don't know it's because there's less fighting and there's less of the enforcer in the league. I don't know. I don't necessarily like it. I always say that, you and I have texted back and forth going, that was a fine hit. Why is that? Like, why you got somebody coming
why is the guys?
after?
Yeah,
Yeah, why is the guy coming after him? Like, it's just you got yourself caught in the trolley tracks and you got nailed for it. Like, I didn't see this week. Didn't what's his name on Vancouver got hit pretty good. Hughes got dropped this week. Came through the middle and got absolutely laid out, and no one went after I think it was somebody. I forget who they were playing. Um, and there was no call to action on it that I saw. Maybe I missed it in the highlights, but I agree. It bothers me to some degree. I don't think that they'll ever completely eliminate fighting from the league. I think it's really tough to do that, but I think you're seeing less of that, which I think
yeah,
is leading to the BS stuff that I don't like. I don't like
right.
the sticks up and the non-fighter guys getting in because they do stupid things with the stick up and sticks in the face, cross checks and stuff. Like if you're gonna drop them, you want to go. And I think that's why they leave fighting in the league is that if you want to sought retribution for something, drop them and
It should be
go.
the outlet. It should be
Yeah,
the outlet.
it should be
Yeah.
the outlet, but don't come up with the stick high, hit somebody, that's the stuff I don't like, the BS and the cross check and the whack to the
Well, so,
back.
I would be very interested to see if there are statistics. I mean, I
We should
doubt
look
there
that
are
up.
because it's a very sort of specific type of statistic. But like, if there was some way of isolating all of the incidents in which there was an altercation following a hit, whether it's clean or dirty or whatever, and in those altercations, did the instigator get an extra two? Or did he instigate something, got two for roughing, and the guy who made the original hit and had to respond also roughed him back, and then they both went off and you played a 4-on-4?
Yeah, it's
Because if
interesting.
it's the latter, then there's no cost to defending a teammate on a clean hit, right?
I
Like
agree
if
with you
you defend a
100%.
teammate on a clean hit where there's no penalty, and you start something, you should get an extra two every time,
Agree with
every
you.
single time. And like I said, I haven't seen a statistic and I have zero empirical evidence to back this up. But to me, more often than not, I see the referees just calling two on each side and you just go on.
Yeah, they're evening it up and you can hear them out there. I don't want to take anybody else. I don't want to take anybody else. It's just or they're
Yeah.
letting it go completely, which I also think it's wrong. But I would agree with you. And it definitely feels as though more often than not it gets evened up than giving the power play. But I'd also say, and again, this is a stat I think you need to look alongside it. And I think this is where the league struggles, right or wrongly, is that it just feels like there's way more power plays and way more odd man um
Situations.
opportunities and situations that do you want to add more to that? Like I guess it called me a bit of a traditionalist. I want to see the guys play, and this is why I get frustrated between regular season and playoff hockey because they always say a penalty in the regular season should be a penalty in the playoffs. And that's just we've watched a lot of playoff hockey. It's just not the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not. And as much as I love playoff hockey and I love the grit and stuff, that to me, the two styles of hockey shouldn't exist. It should be the same style and make them play, um, and make them play hard. But I I'd like to see more 5-on-5 play. Not that I want to take penalties and not call the ticky tack stuff and whatnot, but I want and or the I don't want to give up the I do I want to see what you're just talking about. I'd like to see more odd man opportunities because somebody did something stupid in retribution for a good hit or something that happened. Call it so that stuff stops. Because then you
Yeah.
see hopefully more 5-on-5 play where and you stop seeing some of the ticky tack stuff. That to me, I'd like to see more what you're saying. Call the extra penalty for somebody doing something stupid.
Well, I agree certainly with the last bit of that, but there's a downside, and I think there's a reason why there's two hockey games. There's playoff and regular season
Oh,
because they want it. It improves offense and improves the flow of the game when the ticky tack stuff is out of the game. The
yes,
clutching, the grabbing, the stick fouls, the little
go push.
mini slashes stuff, and the interference. Although this is a topic for another day, and I'm going to set it up right now. I would like to spend a half an episode talking about interference penalties. What is goddamn interference? Because quite frankly, the same play is called differently 47 times a game, and it
I don't
drives
think the
me
players
bonkers.
know what the difference is
No,
in.
they have no. So we'll come back to that at a different time. I'm just setting up the stage for you and for our audience that I really want to talk about the ambiguity of interference. But
Yes.
besides that, they've got to get that ticky tack stuff out of the game for a couple of reasons. Number one, it improves the play of the game and keeps it moving, and it's a more entertaining brand of hockey. And theoretically, once they started calling that stuff a lot more closely, it was supposed to mean that would be less of it, and then there would be less penalties. Whether or not that's been borne out statistically, again,
Okay.
another piece of empirical evidence I don't have, but it's it seems that there's more here. But in past years, it did look like. And by the way, it always happens at the beginning of the season, right? You see what
Right.
you can get away with, how they're calling things,
Yeah.
and then there's less and less of that as the season goes on. But more importantly, or just as importantly, I should say, if you called it the same style you did in the playoffs with the same level of physicality in the playoffs, that hockey I don't think is sustainable over an 82 game season. These the players would get just worn out. Um, you
No,
know,
no
if
question. But I guess what you made is that you want to see the ticky tack stuff out of the game.
yeah,
I guess my response to that is then it's got to get removed from the playoffs, and it's not. They're not calling the ticky tack stuff in the playoffs, which leads to all the scrums, all the
yeah,
pushing and shoving, all the BS, which led to me. And look, Florida was a great team. They're proving it this year. They're playing great, but it led to that style of hockey where
mm-hmm.
they were emphatically trying to do ticky tack stuff because it wasn't getting called. And then that led to all the brouhahas and all the crap, which is to me, then if you're not going to call it in the regular season, to your point, call it in the regular season, call it in the playoffs.
Yep.
But I agree to
Oh,
you that style in the playoffs, that rougher, tougher hockey is not sustainable over 82 game schedule. I agree
Yeah.
with you 100% on that.
No, okay. I see your point. I see your point. Um, so what last thing before we leave the topic of fighting? The flip side of it. And I'd love to get a guest, a former player at some point, would be great, who could tell us what the etiquette is when you can decline a challenge.
Right.
Like when someone says comes after you because you hit their guy or whatever, and like Nito Niederreiter turned a fight down after a questionable hit, not a clean hit, this week, and was jawing at whoever it was that challenged him from the box and just shaking his head. I was like, okay, like what are the rules for that? When can you say this isn't the time of game for a fight for me, or I'm not going to fight you? You're 6 times my size. Like there's got to be rules for that.
But I agree 100%. I don't think anybody knows what those are, but this is, you know how I feel about the two Kachuk brothers. This is why I hate them so much. Because on Tuesday night, Ryan Reaves was clearly trying to bait Kachuk into a fight.
And he
And
walked away.
Kachuk walked away maybe 3 or 4 times. And then Kachuk would skate down the other end of the ice and do something stupid to somebody else and wouldn't face up to Reaves. And to me, that point is exactly what is the etiquette? He should have then fought Reaves. And no
Yeah.
different to his brother Matthew in friggin' Florida. He's the biggest mouthpiece on the ice, biggest agitator on the ice. And then when Reaves or someone like Reaves skates up to him and tries to fight, he sort of laughs, sticks his stupid mouth guard out at them, and skates away. Yet then he goes into the corner, cross checks somebody that's smaller than him, hits the goaltender, whatnot, and then won't fight, and then stands there and
Oh
takes a
no, he'll
couple
fight somebody
steps.
smaller than him. I've
Yeah.
seen both
Oh, well, he
Kachucks
fought
fight somebody
Pasternak in the
smaller than
playoffs because he knew he could beat
yeah.
him. See, to me, that's to your point, what you're asking, I agree 100%. At some point, someone's got to beat the two crap out of those two guys that's bigger than them so that they don't do that stupid shit. Or you can't, or so, like, again, I agree with you 100%. What is the etiquette? Or the other side of the equation is let's go back a couple generations to when we were younger and loved. You got the guys like Wendell Clark, Cam Neely,
Yep.
those guys that could play hockey, score goals, and drop them at will when they needed to, and fight and defend themselves or defend their play the mates. Those were the guys, and I guess even to the Kachuk brothers' defense, the father was like that. He was played a tough style. He would defend. He would fight. He would drop anybody, whatnot. But the two sons are little pricks. Um, so I guess what is the etiquette? The etiquette to me has gone out the window, right? To some
Yep.
degree, that you've got guys like that in the league, and there's not the only two of them. There's lots of them that do it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you know, what's his name in Boston? Marchand is another one, who's a lippy little, SOB, and he's not going to fight him, but he's a small guy, right? Well, who should he fight? Right? He's not going to go fight Reeves. He's stupid to fight Reeves to get killed. But, you know, if you're going to play that agitator style, you got to accept a little bit of abuse or
Oh yeah. Sam
decency
Bennett too.
because yeah,
It's
Sam
not just
Sam
Kachuk.
Bennett, yeah, absolutely. But he's again another guy who won't fight anybody,
Yep.
right? But he's borderline dirty in some cases. You see him going down the ice and the way he hits people and does stuff. So I don't know. I think that etiquette has gone out the window. And maybe a little bit of that is because the enforcer's gone away. They know they can get
Yep.
away with it on some teams because some teams just don't have anybody to go after him. And I think case in point was Saturday night with Reaves hitting Nurse.
Yep.
No one on the Oilers was going after Reaves. Now it happened quickly. The whistle got blown. He was escorted out of
The
the ice.
linesman was blocking
He was
him from
gone.
everywhere
Right.
else.
But there's nobody on the Oilers that are going to go after him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
They're not built that way.
all right. So
So
I think that's the
last
build of
question.
the leagues is that's part of the problem. The way some of the teams are built, they don't have somebody that,
Yeah. So well, the Canadians have Arbor Jacki now. At least they got one guy that can
yeah.
defend the team.
He seems to like
Why
to drop them too.
Wi-Fi does like to drop them. He had a good tilt this
Yes.
week,
Saturday
which
night he had
leads
a
me
good
to
time.
yeah, which leads me to my last question on fighting. And to me, as a hockey fan and as a guy with as much natural bloodlust as the next dude, are fights less entertaining than they used to be?
No question.
Like I feel like these guys. get hand on the jersey. May try to take a couple of jabs with that hand if they can get the jersey loose enough. And then it's just swinging with their good hand over and over and over again. Maybe they're pulling to try and get the guy off balance a little bit. But the fights where I felt like somebody could get knocked out at any time from our youth. Maybe it's just because most of the fights from those days were like guys who were practicing knocking dudes out,
Right.
for lots of time. But
Yeah.
it just doesn't. They're not as entertaining.
Right. Well,
They,
I
they
think there's three reasons. So one, you just pointed to, I think there's less guys practicing the art of it. And again, because I'm a Leaf fan, I'll go back and use that as an example. You did see this year McCann and Nyes in practice getting Reaves, giving them pointers on how to do it. But so there's less guys that do it from a natural perspective and doing it regular basis, and there's less fights. So I think there's less guys doing it. Two, the shield has a lot to do with it in
yeah,
terms of the punching. They're really being careful. Like
you don't want to break your hand on
you
a
want to break
helmet.
your hand on a helmet or a face mask and whatnot, and you can't physically remove somebody's helmet. That's a penalty now, right? Too, you physically remove
Yeah,
somebody's helmet. If it falls off and a punch is great, but you can't grab and take it off. That's two. The third is the tie down jersey.
right.
Back in our day, younger days, our day, well, we're not that old,
You
but
got the jersey over
20
the
years ago, you got
head,
the
and
jersey
all
over the head, and the jersey
you could go to
didn't
town.
sit and tie down the way it does now, and you could go to and somebody got that advantage. So I think those are three big reasons that have changed fighting. Obviously, the biggest thing is just there's just less guys that are studying. It's hard to call it an art, and we just been bad mouthing it, but the art of fighting. Less people are doing it.
Yeah, I mean, because some of these fights look like Jake Paul and Mike Tyson out there. They're just
Right.
sort of dancing around each other, throw a few punches, and collect their $60 million.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Yeah,
Oh, we're gonna get
that's
Mike
thank
Tyson on
God
this
that wasn't
podcast. Let's not talk
thank
about
thank
that.
thank God that wasn't the pay-per-view. I'll just say that.
No.
Sorry, Netflix. As a media guy, that was a bummer on your part.
Well,
Guess
and
what?
a buffering of it was terrible. Like if it's somebody
Yeah.
bought Netflix to get that, you
Yep.
lost.
You lost.
So,
So guess what? We're at 35 minutes,
yep. We didn't
and
get to
we
the
ran
ratings.
out. We ran out of time to talk about ratings again. So it means we'll have another week's worth of games to incorporate into our averages.
Great.
So when we talk about ratings, we'll have a little bit more data, although the data is not great. But
Right.
yeah, looking forward to talking about that with you
But before we wrap,
sometime.
yeah, we definitely gotta get to the ratings and talk about it. And having a bigger sample would is helpful. The one thing I do want to point out in this league, because I don't think they get enough shout out, and we're doing a hockey podcast, we're not doing an NHL podcast. Let's give a shout out to the PWHL. Just got three brand new deals in Canada with TSN, RDS, CBC, and actually Amazon. So let's give our hats off to the PWHL. Got brand new broadcast deals in Canada. And let's challenge the American broadcast system to somebody except for YouTube picking up these games. These women are showcasing talent. They deserve to have a platform, and they definitely need to have a platform in the US. And somebody needs to pick them up because it's great content. They're playing good hockey. And they need to grow the women's game, and the women's sports needs to take a bit more of a forefront. So I personally want to give a shout out for TSN, CBC, and Amazon for doing that in Canada. It's time for somebody in the US to do the same thing.
You know what? The NHL, it's about time the NHL showed a little bit more support for
Yes.
professional women's hockey. And so I think it would make a lot of sense. Now, it's not a huge deal, a ton of exposure, but I don't see any. Look, if the NHL network can carry the major junior world championship every Christmas time and New Year's, there's
Yes.
no reason why they can't do that, for at least the women's women's hockey playoffs, professional, or um, a game or two a week.
Right. There's
Like NHL on the Fly is a great show. I don't mind missing it a couple of days a
mm,
week to
right.
see, a women's game or two.
100%, 100%. That's put on NHL Network. ESPN Plus could be carrying these things, but YouTube, come on, it's their own channel,
Yeah. Well,
and if
ESPN Plus, you
ESPN
have to
is
have a ESPN. There has to be an underlying production for them to
well, there
carry.
is
Like,
they can take the Canadian broadcasts, and
true, true, true.
actually the PWHL is producing the games in Canada themselves.
Oh, are
So
they?
the production is there, and they have a broadcast group in the US producing them for the US local broadcasters, and then the TS, and they're producing a Canadian feed as well. So there's a feed there that they could take. It wouldn't cost them
Oh,
anything. So again, I'd challenge if ESPN and TNT and Amazon are invested in hockey, invest in the women's hockey.
yeah.
Showcase it, give it a stage. Let's do it. That's all I want to say. And
At the very least, on a streaming basis, right? It's not
absolutely.
taking up any shelf space. There's no
Absolutely. But
reason not
to
to.
your point, NHL Network should be carrying these games hands down. It's just not right that somebody in the US hasn't stood up yet. And I've written about
Yeah.
this on my various social media and LinkedIn stuff that someone needs to step up in the US on this side of things.
All right. Well, let's hope that happens.
Right.
In the meantime, we got we may have more Habs stuff to talk about than Leafs stuff next week,
Yeah, it's okay. It's good. Happy to talk
based on
about the Habs.
the break. But well, if there's not a lot of Leafs to talk about, maybe we'll actually get to ratings next week.
Yeah, we will. Let's definitely get to the ratings. Let's do some of that. We got to figure out things, and let's hope the Jets survived their stint through Florida because they didn't enjoy the
They're
hot
Florida
weather.
laws, right? Where they look more like the New York Jets than
Yeah,
the Winnipeg Jets.
great.
All
Well, it's
right,
good to see
buddy.
you,
Well, hey,
Ryan.
have a
Thanks for another fun week, and we'll see you next week.
all right, man. Talk soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye bye.